I know Emily Blunt connected you with John Krasinski for A Quiet Place. So how did that all go down?
You mean the meeting, or
yeah, just like how she brought you on board and your discussions with John.
Sure. It happened actually already a year before we started this shooting. So, yeah, I met Emily on Girl on a Train and became very close friends. So we were, friendly for a year. And she called me one day and said, my husband's going to direct this movie. He's very excited about it. And what do you think about, having a chat to him? And I said, of course. And it was about John Krasinski has a very high energy level. So it was like 5 minutes later he called, and for 45 minutes he was just expressing this, great idea he had from this script that he read, and it was really wonderful because throughout the next year he started writing the script or changing the script and would send me drafts, or one had an opportunity to give notes, which is very rare these days that you are on so early, and so with the ending there was different ways to go, and so it started kind of really slowly, but it was really interesting to be part of seeing how the script develops with him, and really it gave me a chance to understand what his true vision was, I think.
What was it like going from Fences and Molly's Game to very dialogue-heavy films to a film with barely any dialogue?
I mean, Aaron Sorkin, well, Fences as well, but also Aaron Sorkin, and 200 pages full of like non-stop dialogue to A Quiet Place was a bit of a jump. But it was fun. I mean, those three movies for sure are very different. Fences was the first thing Denzel said to me is, this is a play, and I don't intend this to be anything else, but it's for the screen. So he always wanted to keep that theatrical, approach, but obviously he wanted it to be cinematic. So that was a really fun challenge. And then Molly's Game was a lot of words, and a lady that was like passive. She's standing there watching a lot of games that we didn't really want her. So it was a different and that was a difficult challenge, but a great one too. And then A Quiet Place. Obviously the challenge with that one is that there were very little dialogue, and we had to find a way. We obviously had to think about the sound design very early on, which is something I'm going to bring with me for the future.
The film is a genre film, but it's shot not like a genre film at all. There's a lot of warmth to it. Like there's like a softness to it. It's not very harsh, and there's a lot of colors, like with the clothing and the grass and the corn silo. Was this something you discussed with John, like in like pre-production, about how to shoot like that warmth and color?
Yeah,
in the film?
He from the very beginning he said this is a warm movie, whatever that means. He said, I'm not sure it needs to be orange all over, but it needs to be first and foremost a movie about a family who's trying to survive and who's fearing everything out there, figuring out what is our survival, how are we gonna do this. So, and then there is the story between the four of them, and especially between the father and the daughter, with this guilt. She knows and she feels that he's still blaming her, and I had, long conversations with John where I was like, where I come from, you would, like, if your child has done something that is bad, you would do everything you could to not make her feel guilty, like feel that it's, to blame her. And we had those debates because she did do something wrong, and just to understand what is that relationship between them. And the end of his story is that he says that I love her. It's not about the love. He loves her, but there is that blame thing, and so that was really important. But within that, the warmth came from John wanted to be a portrait of a family and have more of a poetic feel to the barn and their existence. And within that world, there are those creatures out there. So he always wanted that warm
Because even the red lights, like obviously to turn on to signal danger, but they reminded me of Christmas lights, not like a siren going off, It's like,
yeah, and he actually wanted Christmas lights.
Okay.
But then they are like that, and I was like, oh, gosh, guy, you gotta help me out.
You need like
so I was like, how can we make those Christmas lights a little bit bigger? But and just that red light took me a lot of like testing and figuring out, you know, what exposure I'm going to shoot, because we don't want to do overexpose and then have some weird pink color or white, you know. So it's like very, you know, I was doing a lot of tests to try and figure out, well, how do I get this perfect red light, and you know, and lighting the people what obviously they wouldn't do, but just get that real kind of look going.
I also love the pacing of the camera, because obviously the characters are moving slowly because they can't make noise, but like I feel like in a lot of other like horror films or like thrillers, there's, you know, the camera's more like frenetic when there's like chase scenes or like people running. I mean, there's some running in this, but like the pacing was so deliberate in this film. So was that also something you guys discussed?
Yeah, very much so. It's well, one of the things that I kind of realized very early on is like this is very much about distance. You know, placing the lens really close to an object or somebody who's trying to be quiet is always going to create some kind of, you know, ignite a sound design. Whereas if that same size but on a long lens further back is going to make a cut in the sound, or so we realized, like, you know, it's important that some scenes that you actually stay away, because in a minute, you know, in a second, we know that he's going to knock over a lamp or something else, you know, the creature's going to come, so that there was this dynamic, or at least it would suggest or ignite the sound design to work with that. So it's a very minimalistic kind of approach to things, but it was very much like deciding where is that lens. So it's not just, well, we want this size close-up and what's practical within this room, you know. It was really trying to get that, you know, the closeness and the distance, right? And within that, obviously, some movement. But we spoke about, this is not, if somebody is being quiet and moving slowly because they want to be careful, it's going to be weird to do some fancy, fast, you know, steady cam track through the barn. But also the movement is obviously, there's something about it, because you know, with the creatures out there, and so the slow moves were definitely something we knew we wanted to bring in, especially to the wide shot. So whenever you go out and you see the barn or you see the silo from a distance, it just has this, you know, some of it was done on a slider. So that's how little the camera was actually moving. And then the static shots was very important. But I think we only have one fast track really, is when the boys running out of the barn, and so yeah, the movements, and it was carefully discussed.
Is that creating distance or lack of distance? Do you think that was the key to just building tension and dread in the movie, since you're lacking dialogue, and then you have to take into account the sound design to make up for it? Yeah,
I mean, it was also just making like a floating, gliding overall feel, that it shouldn't be a static movie. It was moving, and we wanted the movement, and especially when they are walking, we stayed with them for a long time, so not to cut to different shots and things. So, you know, the time was important, and that, you know, to not cut in the sound as well. We spoke a lot about sound, actually, in terms of what the visual should be. Mm-hmm. So yeah, the little moves were always planned.
And you shot on film, right?
Yes, it's always a fight.
So why did you decide to shoot on film instead of digital?
I just felt with the overall brief that John gave me, you know, his vision, his kind of the first things that he explained to me in the movies, he was like showing us Jaws and, you know, No Country for Old Men and There Will Be Blood. They were very kind of what I call confident-looking movies. Like you were there, and we kind of figured out, well, the lens is always in the right place. That's just what we got to do. And we're like, all right, sure. But that thing that you're here for a reason, and you know, we don't move faster than the movie does, or so. But those references, and with what the words that he was saying, like you wanted the exteriors to be like an epic, have an epic feel. You know, so the anamorphic lenses, I think, you know, is great for that. And then. So, you know, overall, the warmth, the poetic feel that he was talking about, the movies that he was showing me, the many, many close-ups and the dirt and makeup we were going to do, I think there was a lot of reasons why I felt film was right for this. And he wanted it to be timeless somehow.
It does feel that way, because even if you don't know anything about the movie, you just look at like stills, like you wouldn't really guess that it's a horror film, you know?
No, and I think, and I don't know if it is. It is and it isn't, and I think that's also what appealed to me really with this movie. You know, the mix of genres, and that it is really, it's a thriller and is also a portrait of a family who is, you know, it's facing fear. It's very much about fear, and we spoke a lot about that. You know, today there's this fear out there that, you know, terrorism is everywhere, and your kids are gonna ask, you know, can we go to a concert in Chicago? And you're like, sure, you know, but how are you as a family? How are you dealing with that, and how are you surviving in that? And we all have to, and hoping that it's never going to happen again. But I think that was the creature. There was something about that fear outside the walls of that barn. There was like, so there was a lot of kind of overall subjects that hadn't to do with horror at all. And so there was the one horror element, obviously, and it's big in the movie, is the creature. But we developed it as a thrilling kind of family portrait more than a horror movie.
So are you going to come back for the sequel?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure about that yet.
Why not? Any particular reason, or just...
dates and...
He still has to write it, yeah. Right?
Sorry?
He still has to write it, right?
He still has to write it. He hasn't written it yet.
Yeah. Isn't it called A Quieter Place?
I'm not sure about that.
It should be.
I don't know how it can be any more
quiet. The quietest place. So. Well, Charlotte, thank you so much
for
joining
welcome.
us. We'll see you back here a little bit.
Thank you.